When you dissolve the narrative into facts or data or conquests or management, then you don't have that empowering, summoning glue that will sustain the transaction.
When you said narrative gives continuity to community, data does not. Could you talk about that?
Well, narrative is a plot, and the plot keeps being reperformed. So in the church, the central narrative is the narrative of the Eucharist. On the night in which he was betrayed, he took bread, blah, blah, blah. And every time we meet, we reenact the narrative. And that's the way you create community. So a community will, if it engages in the kind of citizen action that Peter's talking about, a narrative will emerge out of that. And it will be very important to keep retelling that narrative to remind people about what it is that binds us together and what empowers us and what summons us to act. But when you dissolve the narrative into facts or data or conquests or management, then you don't have that empowering, summoning glue that will sustain the transaction. That's what I think. And in Judaism, it's the Passover narrative. So every child has to know why this night is different from all other nights. And the night keeps being reperformed. And I think every community has that kind of narrative, or it will not be sustained into the next generation.
All transformation is a shift in narrative. But the empire has its own mind as to what narrative is most useful for us. And it thinks that the management, the planning, a retributive narrative, the dominant narrative of empire is that the way to solve problems is with more consistency and more control and more predictability. And so that's the narrative that we have to deauthorize. So I like the notion that what you're doing is deauthorizing who has a right to speak. And so the leadership, the empire, the journalism, the religious dominant story, the dominant story of economics, okay, Milton Friedman, all those people, the dominant story is that we don't have enough to go around. It's a scarcity narrative.
Right.
And so it's not getting rid of narrative, because narrative is all I have. It's all we are. All I am is a story. It's trying to reconstruct a narrative from scarcity to abundance, from individualism to communalism, communism. All right, just because it wasn't executed right doesn't mean Marx was wrong. He just had a problem in implementation. And there was a big argument about that in the beginning. And he had to ice pick some people in order to get us. So we're on dangerous territory to talk about communalism, community, common, cooperation, collaboratives. In the wartime, collaborative. If you collaborate, it was with the enemy. So even that word got stained. So it's a reconstruction of who speaks and who we are. So what you're doing with this video is participating in the reauthorization and the reconstruction of what storyline.
And the narrative of community, either explicitly or implicitly, is always serving to debunk the narrative of empire. That it's not true, it doesn't work. So in the Exodus narrative, while you have the enhancement of the community under the covenantal God and all that, you also have a diminishment of Pharaoh, so that through the telling of the story, he is reduced to by the end of the narrative, he is reduced to a pitiful suppliant who has no power of his own. And I think the pivotal point in the deconstruction of Pharaoh is that in the third plague, it says the Egyptians could not produce gnats. Well, if you can't produce gnats, you're just out of business. and so I think it wants to show the impotence of Pharaoh and therefore the inadequacy of Pharaoh's narrative. So it seems to me that the argument now has to be made that the dominant narrative of our society cannot make us safe and cannot make us happy. And all the social indices show that we're not generating happiness or safety.